How's it going, everybody? So the first Diablo Dissected video did amazingly well, and it keeps doing well so far. So I decided to do a second take to some Diablo models. We can even do a third take if I see there's more interest in this game. Now, what I wanted to talk about today is something related to what I saw last weekend, where skins that they released as a collab for Diablo 2, some WoW players were asking, why don't we have this style in WoW? Why can't we have something that looks like this? These look so amazing. So that's one of the things that we're going to be analyzing today. We're actually going to look at those skins in Blender, and we're going to be comparing them to some WoW characters. So make sure you watch the whole thing for that information, and let's get started. All right, so right off the bat, before we get into the technical aspect, the reason why WoW cannot look like Diablo 4, and I'd say like the number one reason is you would put off a lot of players. See, WoW nowadays can work on a potato. In fact, I do know some people in real life that their only game is World of Warcraft. That's the only thing that they play all year. They subscribe, they buy skins, and they have a computer that's been with them for almost a decade, and they can still play WoW on the highest setting possible. They haven't upgraded. And given the current state of prices when it comes to PC parts, I don't think they're going to be upgrading anytime soon. So that goes into why I think the developers of Blizzard have decided not to upgrade the WoW models a lot. They have been upgraded, of course. If you see, there's a difference from WoW Classic to current WoW. And actually, the models from current WoW are called HD. I did a deep dive already in the WoW character models. If you want to look at that, I'm going to leave a link in the description down below if you want to watch that video. Or if you want me to do a comparison between the WoW Classic and the current WoW models, let me know in the comment sections down below. But going to what I was saying, difference between what we have in Diablo 4 right now and what we have in WoW is so wide that it would force people to actually, aside from the fact that it will be building the game from scratch, and we're only talking about art-wise because people were not talking about changing the gameplay, I presume. So yeah, with that being said, let's get into the models. So as you can see here, we have some models. If you watch my previous coverage of World of Warcraft models, you're probably familiar with these guys. These are some, they're not all, because I think there's one for the Sorcerer, for the Spiritborn, and the Druid. I have the Paladin, the Warlock, and the Necromancer skins for WoW. So you can see that they look amazing. And there is a stark difference between something like this and something like this. So that's what we're going to see today. So let's start with the Barbarian, because he's kind of like the thick boy here. These meshes right here that you can see, this is for like the wispy part that has the BFX and looks pretty cool. There was some coming out of the skeleton as well. But you can see that comparing this to the armors that we have for Diablo 4, you can see that there's already a color saturation built into the textures. Like I said on all my dissected videos, I usually don't have the complete shader because we're in Blender, we're not in the engine. So what you're seeing is a bit of roughness and metallic. I don't believe is applied the correct way, but you are seeing the diffuse and the normal map, which is the most important maps that I usually take out for you to appreciate how these models look. So yes, there is a little bit of saturation in here. But you can see that there's also a lot of PBR going on. You can see certain reflections when I go around. And you can see the immense amount of detail that there is here, not only in terms of textures, but also in terms of geometry. This guy, like for instance, just the torso, if we go here, you can see that this has, let's see how many texture sets. Has 1, 2, and 3. Because I believe these are all smoke, different types of smoke, and those are usually one texture. So let's say you have 3 texture sets. That's for the torso. 3 texture sets. This is 1, so we got 4. This is 2, we got 5, 6. It has 4, 6, 7. Oh my god, I said the number. And we have 8. So this has 8 texture sets. Keep that in your mind for when we look at the WoW character. You can see the try count for this character is 37,000. We're gonna see that the WoW characters not even half that. So geometry wise is crazy. It's crazy different. Texture wise is crazy different as well because of all the texture sets. Each texture set means another map, another draw call. And with draw calls means more VRAM usage and more resources. So this is one of the things that I mentioned in the intro as to why getting into this kind of style would completely destroy a part of the WoW population that probably hasn't upgraded their computers for a while. So what I want you to see right here is how the WoW part is bleeding into Diablo 4. And I love this. I love this kind of art style, which is this mix. This is the mix that's getting close to Overwatch, but a little bit more gritty. And what I mean by that is you get the painterly style textures. So the hand painted textures, if you're a 3D artist, you know what that is. If not, I'll explain in a minute. But also you get the PBR part, which is a physical based rendering with all the materials, the roughness, the metallic, and everything reacting to the realistic like that Diablo 4 has. Now, what I mean by hand-painted textures is if we get closer to these textures right here, you can see that in the front. So this part right here is actually this part right here is, well, it's upside down, but it is the same thing. You can see that there is a little bit of a kind of like a more lit situation. So there is a gradation of colors here that, you know, make you appreciate that this part of the texture is brighter than this part of the texture. And that's one of the things that you do when you're doing this hand painted style. You can also see how over here, these are the ridges that you see in the armor. This is usually something that you get a lot in hand painted style, not so much on realistic PBR textures. And the reason for it is because when you do hand painted, you are trying to do the model in an unlit way. And by that, I mean, your model can function if you don't have light in your environment. I'm gonna show that with an example of my own model in a little bit. But just so you know, that's why in hand painted texturing, you kind of draw the shadows on top of the textures as opposed to just letting the light do its thing. I hear some people and some artists, veterans that say that you shouldn't use this for a realistic style. This is my opinion. I think you should. And here is why. And I know if you're working on a team, you just go with what your art director tells you. But in my opinion, the reason why we are getting games that look like washed out, you probably know what I mean. Lately, all these realistic games looks like the textures are washed out. Looks like there's kind of like a blank filter on top of them. And that has to do with the fact that the textures are made to work in a realistic lighting scenario. But the more realistic you try to make things, the less appealing, at least in my case, the less appealing they seem. So that's why I think these textures shine through a lot more than the other ones. I'm not saying the other ones are wrong. I'm saying I personally like these better because it has this kind of like stylized, but it's also using the realistic aspect of Diablo 4. And I think when it comes to games, you're not looking, a game should not look like cinema. So if you want to watch a movie, you go watch a movie. If you want to play a video game, you play a video game. I think games should look more like games, not more like movies. What do you think about that? Let me know in the comments down below. Do you like your games looking more like movies? Do you like your games looking more like games? Because I think this is what a game should look like, more like game and less like real life. And that's why I think these particular armors are so appealing. And there's a lot of people on social media saying that they're going to open the wallets to get these for their game. I personally am not a cosmetic kind of person, so I usually don't buy cosmetics. When I play, I really don't care how the character looks. I just add the things for the stats and be done with it. All right, so looking at another piece, you can see that the legs, this is one that actually makes my point across. So you can see that aside from the wear and tear that's usually painted on either realistic or stylized textures, but you can see clearly the lit parts and the shadow parts in here, how they're actually added to the textures are not necessarily part of the light system from the video game, especially when it comes to metallics. When it comes to metallics, you usually don't use these kind of high saturated colors because you let the actual metal go through and then just add a little bit of wear and tear to make it more realistic. But you can see that how the metal is usually defined when it comes to this kind of stylized textures. All right, now for comparison's sake, let's look at this orc. Now this character, I think it looks great. I think it looks fantastic. I really like this art style. But if you compare it to the Diablo 4 character with the WoW skin, you can see the staunch difference. First of all, the amount of polygons. So if we go to the try count, this guy is 12,000 triangles with his whole armor, and that's not with the helmet. And the other guy was on the 40-ish thousand. So that's a huge difference right there. Then you also have the fact that the models in WoW are kind of like single mesh-ish. So you can see that this is the armor, but the armor is kind of like airbrushed on top of him. So they're not separated pieces like the WoW characters. These are all like, as I'd say, like airbrushed on top of the mesh. And usually, like if you have boots, this is a mesh that changes. Like if you don't have this kind of boots, then you can see his calves and all that. Same thing with the gauntlets. Everything is painted right on top of the mesh. And while I do like how it looks, this is not PBR. So these textures are not meant to have like all the metallic and roughness and all those kinds of things. These are pure hand painted textures that even if you don't have a lighting system, they will still look like there is a lighting system, because that is one of the things that is achievable with hand painted textures. Now you can see here the UVs for the orc. It's one of those horizontal textures, and there's a lot more emphasis on the face than it is on the rest of the body. Again, go watch that WoW video if you want to know a little bit more about these characters. But what I want to get through is the similarity between what's bleeding from WoW into Diablo 4 is this part. Like you can see the light is already painted into the texture, and the shadows already painted into the texture, the highlights, the ambient occlusions actually on the texture as well. Now, like I mentioned a little bit ago, I wanted you guys to see an actual example from mine, one of the characters that I was building. This gets more the point across as to when I say something works in an unlit mode. So right now, the character is in material mode here in Substance Painter, and if I rotate the light, you can see that the light works and it's go around. This is lit mode, and this is why you usually see in engines and in games that has the PBR physical base rendering water flow. Now let me get her here in the shadows, and if we go into color, which is basically on lit mode, you can see that you still appreciate all the features of her. Now, whether it is in the shadows, which is if we go back to material, you can see that I rotated the light. This is an ambient light or HDRI. But if I go into the color part, you can still see all her features no matter which part of the light is facing. And this is what I mean when I tell you that hand-painted textures are meant to work in unlit mode. So without light, you can still appreciate every single part of the texture. I actually like to mix it a bit with the hand painted and the PBR. I know some people that do hand painted textures say that it should not be mixed with PBR. If you're doing hand painted, you should do hand painted. I like to mix them up because I think it looks cool. And yeah, just to show you, here is the human, and the human is the same. When it comes to the armors in WoW, you can see that there are certain parts that are a different mesh, like these shoulder pads on the human warrior. If I hide these, you can see like the shoulder underneath. And same deal with the helmet. If I hide the helmet, you can see the head underneath, but the rest of the body is just as it was painted on. And yeah, you can see the segmentation of the character. Whereas if we go into these guys, which are the ones from Diablo 4, you can see how everything is broken down into, even though this is a single mesh, because this is, if I isolate it, this is one single mesh. But you can see that geometrical detail is creating separation between the plates, as opposed to the WoW character where, yeah, these are plates, but everything is drawn and it's one single mesh. There is no geometrical detail creating the separation. Another thing is, of course, these guys, the textures are much lower resolution than these. I do have the high-res pack installed on my computer, so these textures are all 4K. Now, several of you were asking me about a unwrap tutorial, so I'm putting this character together to show you a little bit about UV unwrapping, how you can unwrap those kind of like with the Blizzard style. And one thing that I want to do with this character is kind of get him into the in-between WoW and Diablo 4, so you guys can see kind of that art style that mix between hand-painted and physical base rendering. I'm also going to try to see if I can get that nitty-gritty look with hand-painted textures, because I believe we can. It's just a saturation and play with color. So make sure you subscribe and stay tuned for those videos. Leave a like and leave a comment for the YouTube algorithm. It helps a lot. And also, if I see that there's still a lot of interest in Diablo 4, then we'll do another dissected video covering weapons and environment stuff. So make sure you share, leave a like, and leave a comment so I know that you guys are interested in more Diablo 4 videos. Thank you so much for watching all the way to this point. I'll see you in the next one.